Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. I'm Rachel Jabaily, and welcome to our Botany360 event on service to BSA and beyond. I just wanted to let everybody know that we are going to be recording this, and we're expecting more people will join us to take part. Okay, so for many of us in academia, we're told or we envision that our job has three components: teaching, research, and service. But in my experience, and I'm a professor at Colorado College, I found that service is the most nebulous of the three. It can be hard to figure out how much time or what percentage of our hours we should spend on service, always at the cost of other things. Service work ebbs and flows throughout our weeks and years, and it can be hard to place some things we do that we value into the service category or onto our curriculum vitae. Service covers a lot. It can be one-off asks, such as serving as a peer reviewer, writing letters of recommendation, or evaluating files for an award. Or major commitments, such as organizing a conference or a meeting, serving as an editor, reviewing grants on a panel, serving on a board, or assuming a major leadership role. We can quickly say yes to many asks, big and small, not really knowing what it all entails at the time and finding ourselves later overcommitted, fitting in service work around other tasks outside of our normal work hours. We may find that showing prowess or even just competence at service activities tends to beget, more service asks. Others around us might be perceived to be doing far less, and we may question why our identities lead us to always be the one to do the work. At its worst, service can be a major source of job frustration, feelings of not being appreciated, and burnout. At its best, service can anchor us to community and give us a sense of purpose when we give back to organizations and people that we care about. When service is thoughtfully chosen at the right point in time and leads to positive outcomes, it can empower us professionally and personally. So the purpose of this Botany360 event is for us to share our experiences about service and our various types of jobs at different career stages, and help each other to develop a deliberate, thoughtful approach to service writ large in our work lives. We want to ensure that everyone understands in particular how to get involved in service and membership to the Botanical Society of America. So we're going to start by introducing our current president of the Botanical Society of America, Brenda Milano Flores, and executive director, Heather Cacanindin, to talk about BSA specific service. And then we'll introduce our panel and have our more general discussion. So they have a presentation, and I'm going to share a screen, and they can take it away.
Well, I'm going to say first, welcome, and thank you for attending this awesome Botany360. So Heather?
Thanks, Brenda, for being here. I'm pretty excited about this. This is the first time we have endeavored to give a more in-depth view of service at the Botanical Society through a workshop or a webinar such as this. I'm going to try not to have a coughing fit. So Brenda is here as my go-to backup, and I really appreciate that. She and I work very closely together as I'm the executive director, and I'm here at the headquarters of the BSA in St. Louis, Missouri, just outside of the Missouri Botanical Garden. And Brenda, where are you located today?
I'm in Illinois. I'm at the University of Illinois.
Great. Sometimes she's in Wisconsin, sometimes she's out in the field. So at BSA, I think about really three different types of service that, there are other ways, of course, to get involved with the journals and with the conference, but in general, in the governance of the society, I think of these three different types of service opportunities. One is committee service, and we have plenty of committees, and most of them are very active committees. And right now there are 31 positions opening up. And that's pretty typical, somewhere between 25 to 35 open positions on committees come up every single year. And committee service is for a 3-year term, unless you're a student, and we do have students on all of our committees. And for students, this is a 2-year term. So we understand that it can be difficult to make those commitment decisions, especially for students. So we shorten that term a little bit for our students. We also at BSA have what's called sections. Some of you may be very familiar with our sections, some of you may not. And I like to refer to them as areas of study or niche areas within the society that someone wants to specialize in. We have them just for areas of study, like I said, so genetics, systematics, ethnobotany, ecology, but we also have them by area of the country. So there's a Northeast section, a Southeast section, a Pacific section. And we also have a section that's primarily undergraduate institutions. So there are different ways that you can network and get together with people with similar interests through those sections. And the sections also have leadership within the section. So it's a great way. I know that Brenda, she did some service for the ecology section for many years. So it's a great way to kind of get involved, like dip your toe into involvement with the society. And when you renew or join with your membership for the BSA, you can join a section or many sections, as people do. And that way you're ensured in getting the communication from the section and learning when there are openings, because those terms of service vary in length for the section, and they're all kind of doing their own thing. So it's really important if you're interested to join a section so you can get those communications and you'll know what's going on. And then, of course, we have a board of directors for the society. And on that board, there are 12 different positions. And this coming year, there are 4 positions that are open. And those are also 3-year terms. And for students, they are 2-year terms. Every year, we're looking for a new president-elect. This year, we're also looking for the secretary position, director at large for education, and a student representative. Next slide. If you want to find out more information just in general about the governance of the society and just review some of the information about sections or committees, the BSA policies, who's on the board, all of that good stuff, you could go to botany.org, and at the menu at the top, there's something called governance on the menu. And there's a drop down with all kinds of good information there. In that drop down, there's something that says committees and committee officers. That gives you a really nice description of each of the committees and what they do. So if you're interested in committee service, that's something to look at. The sectional bylaws are there. So if you want to know a little more about what the sections themselves are about, you can look at the bylaws of those sections. And also I want to point out that the new this year, we have written descriptions of each of the board positions that are open and accepting nominations. And you can find those also under this menu. I haven't coughed yet, so we're doing well. So I'll go over next just the process and timeline for getting involved in some of these ways with the BSA. For committee service, we're in the middle of the application process right now. It started in November. It's a very short application form. We wanted to keep it super simple. It was a process that was developed over time. I think we're in our 4th year of doing it this way. So there's an open call. It's sent out many times in emails to members. It's also advertised in social media on Blue Sky, X, and Facebook and Instagram. So if you're interested in serving on a committee, you can click on the link in any of those emails and any of those social media posts, and it will take you to a place where you fill out this form. Basically, you're giving a very short statement of interest, a short CV that you attach, and I think it asks a few other demographic questions, and you submit that. And that's an open call between November 1st and February 1st. So you still have time if you're interested in committee service, get those applications done. Then we have a committee at BSA, which I love because the name of it is Committee on Committees. And that is the group of people that volunteer to serve to review all these applications and try to put the committees together like a little puzzle, looking for, different skills we need, gaps to fill on these committees. And usually by May, we're contacting all of the applicants to let you know which committee you've been assigned to, and inviting you to start your service, which starts right after the botany conference that happens in the summer. So it's a little bit of a long process. People apply and then they have to wait and wait. But the service begins in the summer right after botany conference takes place. Now I'll talk about board service. So we've kind of gone to a new process, which I think is going to be a nice workflow and more transparent for people. As I pointed out earlier, you can find the descriptions of the positions on the board that gives you a good idea of what's involved in each of those positions. But it's a very simple nomination process. Anyone can self-nominate by filling out the form, or other people may nominate somebody else. And I mean, that's just a form that asks like 4 questions, like who do you want to nominate, what's their email, and submit. And then step 2 is a more detailed information gathering form, and also kind of confirms with that person that they're still interested and do want to serve, and especially if they've been nominated by somebody else. And it asks some questions that are more detailed about, why they might want to serve, and things like that. Step 3 is that we do have an election committee, and they review those detailed forms and have discussions about, looking at the board holistically. What gaps in representation do we need to fill? What gaps in skills do we need to fill? And then step 4, a ballot is prepared of 2 candidates for each position. That's something that's laid out in the BSA bylaws, that we should have 2 candidates for each position. Sometimes people run uncontested if we cannot locate or confirm a second candidate. And oftentimes there are many people nominated for a position, but at this time we're only allowed to put 2 candidates on the ballot. So the election committee has a very difficult job of talking to different candidates and looking at the board holistically and making a decision about who's going to end up on the ballot. And then our election takes place in the March-April timeframe. So right now we're in that time frame, usually between December and February 1st, of gathering those nominations. So think about it if you're interested in serving in any of those open positions on the board, or if you know of someone you think would be good, to make sure you nominate them by February 1st. And this is a little bit of information more detailed about that information gathering form. So say you're interested, or you think you might be interested, what kind of information would you have to provide? Well, that form where we're gathering some information for the election committee, first of all, confirms your acceptance of being nominated. And then it gathers information like your research interests, or your teaching interests, a statement of interest about why you would like to serve and what you feel you have to contribute. Do you have specific skills or expertise that the board could use, that the BSA can use? That would be helpful in any service with the society. And then there's also a statement about broadening participation, because in our strategic plan for BSA, we have a very strong commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we want to ask every person that's considering serving to the society, what is their commitment to DEI look like? What have they been doing in that space? Or what would they like to bring to the table in that space? So that's the nomination, information gathering and acceptance form. I thought I'd just throw up here, we have 12 board members. 6 of them are considered executive committee and can operate when the board is not in session to make decisions for the society in conjunction with me. And these are those 6 officers: Brenda, Vivian Negron Ortiz, Jenny Zhang, Norm Wickett, Allison Miller, and Melanie Link Perez. And finally, I just put up here my email as well as Brenda's email. And I would just also ask Brenda, do you have any feedback or input about getting involved in sectional service? Because that's not something that I know as much about, but I know you were very involved with the ecology section.
Yes, thank you, Heather, for that great overview. And I would say that I would like to encourage everyone attending the meeting to consider serving. And as Heather pointed out, the sections are a good place where you can get kind of like overall experience about serving for not only a section, but a committee. Each of the different sections, they have different structures, but usually you have a chair, a vice chair, there might be a secretary, somebody that might deal a little bit with the finances. So it can give you, with that, a lot of commitment, I will say, some experience. And I will also voice that serving as part of a BSA committee is also a good way to get a little bit more experience. Usually our committees, there will be a chair, and that's the person that is doing the heavy work, gathering all the members of that particular committee, depending upon the subject matter, and you will be talking about that in a moment. There will be a few meetings, but the role that each of those committees play is essential for BSA, for the strategic planning, and for us to be a strong society and a society that reflects the composition of our overall society. So I will encourage any of you to consider applying or submitting your name as part of a committee. And as Heather pointed out, if there is a particular topic or area of expertise during our botany meeting, go to the business meetings because that's where you learn about what's going on within each section. And that's where you will learn if they're looking for people to serve as part of that particular section. So, yep.
Thanks, Brenda.
Awesome, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Brenda or Heather about BSA specific service? All right, well, thank you both so much for all of that. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we have 5 panelists, and each of us are going to kind of introduce ourselves and talk about our own service journeys and how that's factored into our various careers. And then we are going to move into kind of breakout rooms where you can reflect on your own service path and questions you've had along the way. Okay, so I'm going to go first. My name is Rachel Jabaily. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a tenured professor at Colorado College, which is an undergraduate serving liberal arts school. I guess thinking about my service journey writ large, I grew up doing a fair bit of community service, particularly in the church I grew up in. So, outreach was kind of part of what was valued. And thinking about service as charity is potentially useful, but might not be particularly helpful as you're thinking about service professionally. I see it more as like part of my professional job. Um, that said, volunteering in my community writ large in ways that have nothing to do with botany or science is still a really important part of my life and balances me out, frankly. I think going back to graduate school is when I really started doing service. I'm thinking back to Darwin Day at Wisconsin-Madison that one Emily Sessa and I were doing. Maybe Karolina Heyduk attended it as an undergraduate, kind of a one-off community-facing event. But in grad school, that was the first time I really got to serve on a search committee, and I was the grad rep on a search committee for someone who's on this call. And that was really exciting. I also got to evaluate candidates for an award. And so for the first time going through that huge stack of applicants was really, really eye-opening. All of these activities, I think, were really worth my time in grad school because I was developing skills and perspectives useful for being a future faculty member. And those who wrote letters of recommendation for me were able to talk about those experiences as well. These were great breaks from research and teaching tasks of grad school and honestly provided me with really fond memories and great friends. When I was a postdoc, that's when I started doing peer reviewing in earnest, and I initially got involved in service to ASPT through that. I found that that was the time when I started giving back to societies and organizations that had supported me as a student. I got in the habit of putting all activities that were service to the profession on my CV, and keeping up with that is important because you forget. And then when I was on the faculty job market, I reflected upon my professional network, as well as future opportunities of ways to serve it, as well as my future employers, the colleges I was applying to, in my various cover letters. When I became a professor, service both to my professional societies and in particular my college employers really ramped up. I've worked for two primarily undergraduate institution colleges, and in both cases, significant annual service to the college is expected. Substantial service to, say, a professional society, etc., cannot get you out of that expectation. And there is a lot of expectation related to service for tenure and promotion. I serve on hiring committees for faculty and other administrators most years. I do a lot of advising work, both formally and informally, for students, including lots of letter writing. And I am assigned annually to a campus committee, and I've moved into leadership on lots of those. In one case, we were a committee interfacing with the Board of Trustees. And recently, I've been involved with actually running faculty service and assigning faculty to committees, as well as running our faculty meetings. Now that I'm tenured, expectations for service just continue to grow, especially as I head into departmental leadership, which will be a partially compensated role. These other ones have not been. I guess I would estimate I spend about 10 to 15 hours per week on college-related service at this point in time. I am currently the director at large for education for the BSA, which is a 3-year elected position. I'd say throughout the year, there's various regular tasks that we do via email. And then we meet multiple times a year for a couple hours each for board meetings online. And then we have these kind of bookend meetings during the annual botany conference that we're required to attend. And BSA pays for us to attend those meetings, which is really great. I also have a lot of specific tasks related to education for BSA and related committees, as well as I've signed on to various ad hoc committees. And I volunteer for Planting Science, which is a BSA-led granted initiative at K-12 Botanical Education, which is really fun, really enjoyable. I guess I'd estimate I spend about 10 hours per month on BSA board work. And I mean this sincerely, that my service work to BSA is by far the most positive service experience I've ever had in and out. And it's because of the excellent BSA staff and the structure that they provide, as well as kind of our deep community that we have around it. Working with people I actually know, meeting annually, that's been really, really positive. I would say that being a tenured professor, I've gone through the tenure and promotion process, and a standalone service statement was required for that. In my job, I'd say it's understood that poor service will be reflected also in poor collegiality in letters of rec, which you never see as the applicant. Excellence in service cannot save you from termination for inadequate teaching or research. So those should always be top priorities. And as a college, we're starting to have really interesting conversations about how activism, community-facing service, et cetera, might be valued for tenure and promotion moving further. So that's my statement there. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mackenzie.
All right, thanks, Rachel. Hi, everybody. I'm Mackenzie Taylor, and I am an associate professor at Creighton University, which is in Omaha. And I started in 2011 at Creighton. And Creighton is Jesuit private, which gives it maybe a slightly different flavor for service than some institutions. I would sort of echo a lot of what Rachel said. I would say I started my professional service in grad school. I did a little bit with the department. I was active in our graduate student organization and served as vice president of that for a couple of years. And through that role was representative to our graduate student senate. And that was really interesting to sort of see some of the behind the scenes of the university. That was maybe my first taste of sort of maybe the politics of the stuff that went on. And like Rachel, I also count outreach. I always say service to the wider community. So I started getting involved in, I'd give guest lectures in other classes, sort of, for example, I led a workshop on botanical language for one of the creative writing classes, or gave a talk at the Tennessee Wildflower Pilgrimage. So trying to kind of get involved with amateurs or people who weren't necessarily going to be professional botanists. And then my service to the BSA also started then. So I was a student representative to the board, which was a fantastic experience. And one of the most valuable things was I really got to meet people and work with people for a long period of time. So it wasn't quite the same as, discussing your research or being involved in a mixer. You were working on solving problems together, which I think is a great way to get to know people. I also served on the investment committee, which I was not qualified for, but I learned a ton to be on that committee. And like Rachel, I was also involved in planting science. So also some of the more outreach side of things. As a pre-tenure faculty at Creighton, I had one big piece of service. I was in charge of the Claire Booth Luce program for women in science at Creighton. So developing a lot of programming for women students and faculty, invited speakers, panels, lunches. And I taught a class associated with that and also oversaw the scholarship portion of that. So getting nominations and making sure everything was kosher with the national organization. That was a ton of work. So that was sort of my big piece of service. And then everything else I did was that ad hoc service, starting to review proposals, a little bit of NSF ad hoc reviewing, a lot of judging of posters for student presentations. And my goal as a young faculty was really to do what was student-centered. Like, how can I support students? What are these things that need to be done to help students, get experience and learn? And then as I got tenure and got a little bit more established, I started to sit on some more of those committees. I serve on the honors board at Creighton, which is in charge of the Creighton's honors program. I just stepped off a 6-year commitment to the curriculum committee, which was a lot of work, about 5 hours a week, nonstop, overseeing course proposals and assessment. I've done teaching Creighton's freshman seminar, which is not considered teaching so much as service at Creighton. So that's a lot of advising. I also do a lot of advising, a lot of letter of recommendation writing. I'm also really involved in Nebraska Native Plant Society, which I got involved in specifically to meet botanists in Nebraska, and also to sort of learn about all the different field sites and native plants and to increase my own awareness of where I was teaching. And then my service to the Botanical Society, I am currently editor of Plant Science Bulletin. I took that on as a pre-tenure faculty, which involved a conversation with my chair about what that would look like. And I will say that he has been very aware that I have that big piece of service. And so I'm, for example, I've not tried to sit on like the tenure committee, which is a ton of work, which would overlap in time with that commitment. So when I step down from that, I'm kind of looking forward to maybe exploring some of those other options. But and then I'm also really active in the PUI, the Primary Undergraduate Institution section, and I try to maintain ties in service with development and structure as well. So a mix of national service and local service and university service. So that's sort of what my journeys look like.
Thank you. Karolina.
Hi, everyone. I'm Karolina Heyduk, she, her pronouns. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Connecticut. Like has been said, my initial foray into service was all started in grad school, and that included serving on the Grad Student Association. So we ran events, we were the representative for faculty searches in the department, that kind of thing. And also some outreach. I led an outreach program in grad school to the sort of local K-12 community for multiple years. But really got going with sort of broader non-local service as a postdoc. So that included joining as a reviewing editor, the editor board at APS, one of the BSA journals, and started, I think, then serving on BSA committees as well. First the Education Committee, and then Early Career Professional Development Committee, the long one. When I started my first faculty position at the University of Hawaii in 2020, I definitely went through this phase of I have to prove that I have leveled up, and thus I must collect all of the service things on my CV. And that was a mistake. Don't do that. But it was a good lesson to learn that you should really think about the service you agree to, if it brings you joy, if it fulfills you in some way. That's an important component of this beyond just does it look good on your CV. So currently I'm the director at large for DEI for the BSA, and that role does bring me joy, in case anybody was worried. But when I agreed to do that, I actually used that as a way to step back from some things that I didn't want to do anymore. So I'm currently involved in the BSA through that. I also am an associate editor at the Annals of Botany. And so together, those two things do take up a non-insignificant amount of my weekly time. The AE in particular is maybe a couple hours a week. The BSA director at large role varies. It can be a lot when I've forgotten or put off doing something to not very much at any one time. I also review papers at times and try to serve on a grant panel once a year-ish. And that actually is a lot of work, but I really enjoy serving on NSF grant panel. So again, this is one of those things that I've realized I like doing. And so I say yes when the opportunity comes around, but within some limitations, so I don't spend all my time reading other people's grants instead of writing my own. Internally at UConn, I'm the director of the herbarium, which is a form of service, though it does not actually on paper reduce my sort of expectations of service to the department more generally. So I still serve on committees, although currently fairly protected from too much committee work because I am pre-tenure. And likewise, I have used my pre-tenure status to say no to invitations to serve on university committees. Just going to bypass that until I have tenure. So, and then other things that are sort of standard, serving on graduate student committees. Yeah, I think that kind of covers my current committee roles.
Thank you. Eli.
Yeah, so I am Eli Hartung. I'm a new PhD student at Texas State University, and I'm one of two of the student board representatives. And I think my service began probably my undergrad. I worked with the Utah Native Plant Society outreach garden that they had, which was probably one of my favorite services because I just got to talk about Utah plants. But then that kind of expanded. I helped a lot with my undergrad's botany club for most of the time while I was there. And then when I moved to my master's, I got involved with our grad student organization and was spent most of my time there on some president spot. And then during my master's, my advisor nominated me for this student rep position where I've been since 2023. And it's been a great experience, I think, for me, and seeing different kind of outreach opportunities. And the student representative position, I think, is a kind of fantastic position, as the panelists before me have talked about, getting involved in grad school and being on the board and seeing how a society functions and seeing how a conference works is a really great experience, I think, for a graduate student to see. And you don't really get to see that unless you get involved with something like this. For the position I'm in, our big kind of goals and jobs are to plan student-based events for the annual meetings, and then also represent student interests and voices at the board meetings throughout the year, which has also been a great experience and opportunity. I would say that kind of expectations and demands of the position, for at least the student rep position, are intensely variable. It's incredibly busy and hectic about 2 months before the meeting, and then it's incredibly slow and not demanding about 2 months after the meeting. So it's very variable, which can be a little bit hard to plan for coming in, but it does make juggling it a little bit easier that there are downtimes with it. And I think seeing the student rep position on my CV and having that service has been, I think, really valuable for my kind of growth as a grad student. I think it's very attractive on my annual reports, and I get a lot of very positive feedback that I'm involved with a national society as a grad student. So yeah, I mean, I can't sell the position enough to other students. I think, did I hit all the points? I think I hit all the points. I think that's all I've got.
Thanks, Eli. And finally, Emily.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Sessa. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Patricia K. Holmgren Director of the William and Linda Steer Herbarium at the New York Botanical Garden. And I always have to take a breath because it's a really long title. So I was a faculty member at the University of Florida for 9 years before moving to NYBG about a year and a half ago. So some of my service history is from more sort of traditional academic standpoint, and then from since coming to the garden, it's obviously a different type of institution. It's a not-for-profit, it's a botanical garden. We're not an academic institution, we're not a degree granting institution, so the service expectations are a bit different here, but then there is also a lot of overlap with more sort of traditional academic institutions. So I'm going to follow Rachel's lead and go like back, like way back. It was inspiring to hear about your childhood introduction to service, and it made me realize that for me it was really Girl Scouts. So those of you who know me might not be surprised to know that I am literally a card-carrying lifetime member of the Girl Scouts. Because I got my Gold Award, which is like, if you're familiar with the Eagle Scout and Boy Scouts, it's the highest thing you can do, and I got that in Girl Scouts. I volunteered and then worked my first job at a women's resource center, and then I ended up doing like a whole project for my Girl Scout Gold Award that was about sort of women's access to resources for women in trouble and stuff like that. So I think for me that was probably like the earliest sort of service exposure that I had was Girl Scouts and the sort of ethos of that organization, and then specifically working in a women's resource center. And then in college I got involved right away with Habitat for Humanity, and that was like a dominant theme of my college years, actually, was doing Habitat for Humanity every weekend. And that was a really wonderful experience because it was a great community of people. I got to learn a lot doing it. I got to learn a lot of practical skills, but then I also got to use those skills. And I think that for me, part of the service activities that I've found the most rewarding are ones where I can use my skills in a way that feels impactful. Like we all have things that we're good at and things that we're particularly good at, and like being able to use those skills in really meaningful ways is very rewarding for me. And then in graduate school, yes, Darwin Day, back to Darwin Day in graduate school. So organizing that Darwin Day was a big thing at the University of Wisconsin, and Rachel and Ken and Chloe, maybe you're in there too, and Karolina, you all may have had a role in Darwin Day, either from the organizational or participatory perspective. So that was really fun. And again, it was about like getting to meet people that you might not necessarily get to talk with. Like it was reaching out across departments to get people to participate, which was really fun. I also got involved with planting science mentoring as a graduate student, which was a wonderful experience, as Rachel said. And then I actually I had an opportunity to become an associate editor of a journal in graduate school, which I think is maybe not super common. Usually AE opportunities come along later in your career, but it was for the Fern Journal, the American Fern Journal, and it's not a huge community, the Fern community. And so I was clearly very keen, and I think they were happy to have another associate editor. And so those sorts of things I continued through my postdoc. So planting science, reviewing, being an associate editor, but then the tidal wave really comes when you become a professor. And so then, as other folks have said, it's a lot of university service. So lots of department level committees, university level committees, everything from search committees to curriculum committees. I advised a couple of student organizations. One was a chapter, BSA chapter, was a short-lived student chapter of the Botanical Society of America. But then because UF is a big R1, as is UConn, mentoring graduate students was a huge component of both my primary job, but I would also consider mentoring students to have been a part of the service that I did, and an unseen part of service, because I was one of the faculty members who graduate students would come to when they were having trouble in their labs or having trouble with their advisors. And I think every program has this, right? No program is totally perfect and harmonious throughout. And there are always going to be faculty who students learn about that they can reach out to when they're having trouble. And I was definitely one of those. And that was a burden. I mean, it was like, I was glad to do it, but it would, like, how do you put that on your CV that's being evaluated by your colleagues who in some cases are, part of the issue of what students need to come and talk about. So that was a challenge for, figuring out how to balance that and not get, too emotionally engaged to the point that it was bad for me. So mentoring students is a big thing. I also picked up another couple of associate editorships for another couple of journals. I've done the same sorts of things other people have mentioned about proposal review and panel service. And then my first sort of professional society service was I was the ASPT communications coordinator. And I remember when they asked me to do this, and I was a baby faculty member, and I was so thrilled that this big society wanted me to help them. I was just overjoyed. And now I look back and I'm like, oh, sweet summer child. They they needed all the help that they could get, right? They wanted anyone that they could get. I was not special. but it was like it really used skills that I had, and I was happy to do that, and it was really exciting to get to meet a whole group of people and to be on a council. And I think Rachel and I served on that council together. I have memories of us sitting together Sunday mornings at botany meetings. When everyone else was doing workshops, we were in the ASPT council meetings, as we are now in the BSA board meetings. And I guess I would say here at New York Botanical Garden, all of that service is still really valued at a place like NYBG. Here, there is also, as there is at all these other institutions, there is a focus on internal service, but it looks a bit different. So here at the garden, we have a big focus on exhibitions and on the horticulture department and getting people through the gate, right? Which is not something that you have to worry about at a university. So the outreach that we do here could look like I get asked to lead tours for patrons, for example. So we have a native plant garden full of ferns, and I'll get asked to lead tours for particular groups of garden patrons about ferns, or I've been asked to speak about the herbarium and about our digitization projects. And that's, basically just to help with the mission of the garden to create really enriching programming for our visitors to keep them coming back. We also do tons of tours of the herbarium, so that could be for school groups or visiting scholars or for patrons or for VIPs. So it really runs the gamut from very much sort of, public service and in that spirit of education and outreach to helping the institution try to secure funders or try to secure donors, which was never something that I had to think about in academia. It's just kind of not really part of what you have to do. But it's really fun. And I've also another thing I was going to mention was that there can be some fun sort of like one-off opportunities that you can get. Like I've been invited a couple of times to be a panelist for the German National Science Agency, which is their equivalent of NSF. So if you wait long enough, sometimes you'll get fun opportunities like that might come with travel. I was able to go to Germany on their dime basically a couple of times to do that, which was really interesting and neat to see how different countries, science operation sort of works. Yeah, I guess I'll stop there. Yeah.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks to all our panelists. And don't forget to put this service on your CV that we're doing here today. Okay, so now I'm going to play professor for just a minute. And I am going to ask that you get a piece of paper or the Notes app on your phone or whatever. And I want you to reflect just for a minute about service and you, like whatever that has looked like in the past or what you hope it to look like in your future career. So just take a few minutes and then we're going to talk about this as a group. We're not big enough to need breakout rooms. So service is enjoyable when, service is effective when, and service is not enjoyable or ineffective when, and some examples. So take a few minutes and then we're going to share out. maybe one more minute to finish up some thoughts, and then we'll share. Okay, hopefully you had some thoughts, found some thoughts. Everyone is welcome to share, and if it's your first time speaking, if you could just tell us your name and maybe a little bit about yourself, that would be great. So does anyone have some great love stories of awesome service to share? Go ahead, Chloe.
Okay, I can go ahead. My name is Chloe Drummond. I use she, her pronouns. I'm right now a visiting lecturer at Mount Holyoke College in the Western Massachusetts area, so primarily undergraduate institution. I've done service during grad school and postdoc, and I think I was thinking about one of the things you mentioned about when is service effective, and I think the best experiences that I've had are partly, when you join a service thing, and people have already brought this up in the panel, sometimes folks just need as many people to help out as possible, and you don't get as much guidance when you start. So it's really effective when new people coming into a service position can be supported with the tools, the protocols, previous examples of what have been done, things like that, or maybe having generational overlap with who's serving. So you have people that have done it before, people that are new. So things like that have been really helpful for me, joining sort of new service opportunities. And I have some negative service things, but I can leave the floor open for others to share as well.
I like that idea of sharing good stories first, because in my experience, people have a lot of bad stories, and this could take over. So we'll wait on that for just a second. Other thoughts? Ken.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ken Cameron. I'm a professor at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. Also had a connection to the New York Botanical Garden for 10 years, where I did a lot of service and outreach as well. I like the fact that Chloe mentioned kind of change in service through time, like from early years to untenured professor or whatever you happen to be. I might be one of the older members of this Zoom group today. And I've been thinking a lot about where my entry to service began. So Emily mentioned Girl Scouts and Rachel mentioned church service. So, I was thinking all the way back to junior high school when I was like the student body president or something. And that continued on student council through high school and so forth and so on. So I think there are certain people like us who just have a gene, a disposition to give back. But for me personally, that journey has changed a lot. And I think about those primary school days when I was doing it mostly for fun and just to meet people. And then later in graduate school and early career, thinking about building my resume and professional development, and honestly, sort of selfish, just to make my CV look better. And then later, after getting tenure, it becomes more of an obligation to give back, I think, and to share your experience. And now, finally, as someone who's starting to think about retirement, in the next few years. It's much more about sharing my experience, my knowledge, wanting the next generation to succeed, and paying back, I guess, a sense of duty. And then I'm getting much more involved in community organizations like garden clubs and amateur plant organizations that aren't related to my profession. Well, they are indirectly related, but really not things I list on my CV. Just sort of trying to share the knowledge and help out. So I think that journey is really interesting to look backward and also to look forward.
I'll just add a sort of two things I think make service effective and meaningful is when you actually have the power to implement change. So two counterexamples, in my department, we had a committee that worked for several years trying to figure out how to make changes to the curriculum. But no matter what great ideas came out of it, we just didn't have the power to change that at the college level. But recently, I've been on a committee where we've developed a very specific intro to the major seminar with people who had the shared goal of figuring out what would work best, how to implement it. And we piloted that last semester. And it's just so meaningful to actually see how that can affect the students and affect the curriculum. But if you can't implement what you spend lots of time working on, it's really frustrating.
I'll also just add, thinking about what makes service effective. I feel like the times, and this is also kind of goes along with when it's enjoyable, is like when I feel that my time is being used well. Like I liked how you put it at the very, very beginning, Rachel, that like service is really nebulous. Like, what should it amount to in terms of hours per week or hours per month? Like when I was at UF, my job description had, I think it might even have had written in there that service was like 5% of my job. But as we all know, like academia is not a 9 to 5. So like, was that 5% of 40 hours a week, like a normal profession might be? No, is the answer. So then like you're taking time to devote to these activities that you might be really passionate about and feel really strongly positively about, but frustrating times for me in service have been like sitting through meetings that were not well organized, when you're just like, this is not a good use of my time. You as the whoever is the person who was organizing it, like if you had just put in a little bit more time or effort. And thank you, Rachel, for this being so well organized, by the way, this was wonderful. But yeah, like I think that's more of a, maybe when you're making that sort of switch to being like, as Ken was just talking about, to being like the in the position where maybe you're organizing some of that service, or like some of us who, like Rachel, you're in that position now too, of you're distributing these sorts of assignments to other people. And I think like I've always appreciated like well-run meetings, or just like well thought through and well organized, because to some extent, even though this is like a recognized part of our job, there is also a component of it that like we're giving of our time in an undefined sort of way. So feeling like our time is being used well is something that I've always appreciated, and felt like my efforts were more effective and more meaningful that way.
Yeah, one reason why I think I enjoy doing service for BSA so much, and I'm not just kissing ass, Heather and Brenda had to leave, but because they have full professional staff, fully paid to do a lot of the work. And in my experience, when there's entities that are entirely run as service by people who have other jobs, it's hard. It's really, really hard. And having, full-time staff employed to run things that you do service then within, I've found makes an enormous a bit of difference into how well managed it is, and just that institutional memory when people are just sort of rotating in and out. And that's a big problem with faculty service, like at the college level. It's sort of our third job, and we're all just sort of like picking it up where we think it is every year, and there's not that continuity. So working for institutions with continuity and people who that's their full-time job, I think makes a huge bit of difference.
I also think end dates are really important. Like it's really easy to get into service roles that just sort of roll on and on and on forever. And I think that's a bad thing. I think having like clear end dates and a clear term of service that when it's over, like maybe you have the opportunity, like I've been the director at large for publications for BSA for 2 terms now, I think, maybe 3. No, I think it's 2. Um, but knowing that there's an end date that I'm working towards and that like there's an out if I want it, or if I want to continue, that it's going to be a choice I have to actively make is really important. I think I would like, for advice for earlier career people, I think a piece of advice that I wish I had gotten would be to like try to find service opportunities that are very bounded time wise and very discrete so that you could like try this thing out. You know that you're only going to do it for a certain period of time and then it's going to stop and then you can try something else. And if you did that with a few different types of things or a few different service like natures of service kind of, then you could figure out what you're good at and what you enjoy. But if you jumped right into something that was open ended and that you were potentially going to be doing for years, that would not be enjoyable.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I was assigned to be biology club advisor in my first year at Creighton, and I can't get rid of it. Like, I want to move on, and there are other things that I would like to do instead, but it's one of those things that doesn't have an ending. So yeah, I'd echo that 100%.
Yeah, I had that same experience with undergraduate organizations at UF. Like, that's just not where my heart is. And so, like, the 2 that I was the advisor for, one of them cycled away from me naturally, which was great. But like, someone approached me. It was WISE. It was Women in Science and Engineering. And after I had done it for a few years, and like my passion, it was a wonderful group, but just like me as their advisor, it was just not what I wanted to be doing. And someone else approached me and was like, "Hi, I'm a new assistant professor with a lot of energy. I'd love to take this over. Can I take this from you?" And I was like, please, like, so that was really wonderful. But yeah, that was an example of like, I didn't know before I tried it, but then thankfully someone else came along. But yeah, I hear what you're saying, Mackenzie.
Can
Ken?
I step in here for a second? I'm looking at my notes, and one of the things that I wrote in like all 3 categories relates to plans of succession, which is what you're sort of bringing up. And I think really good service, it's effective and it's enjoyable when there's a plan of succession in place. And that probably relates to politicians in government as well, right? I mean, I think service to our communities, service to our nation, service to our societies. Um, Again, we're always trying to think forward and backward and have those plans in place. I also wrote in my notes several places here about sense of team and teamwork and how doing really good service isn't done in a vacuum. We shouldn't carry the weight exclusively on our shoulders, regardless of any of the examples that the panel has brought up. And it really works well when the team is a well-oiled machine and you have a sense of organizational pride and effectiveness that's coming together. But if you're all by yourself and doing all the heavy lifting, that is not enjoyable. And I think the BSA, from what I understand, the executive committees and the full-time staff are just excellent at keeping all the committees running and the society functioning at such a high level.
Yeah, echoing that, I like to know the actual people I'm working with, maybe being able to see each other at a meeting, and to actually know the nature and values of the institution I'm serving. So I was an associate editor for a journal that was not tied to a society and was like international and very nebulous. And there was no time for us to meet each other. And we were serving a journal, not a society. And then we were sort of serving one of the big bad publishing companies in a roundabout way, right? And that over time just felt really icky and it was not providing joy. Whereas I think serving a journal that is society based and you do know the people and you get to meet the people is much more enjoyable.
Ken, I would love to hear your reflections about chair service, because I think you're the only one here who's served that role, but several of us I know have that coming down the pipeline.
You know, there's good days and bad days. It's a lot of work. And I think what matters the most is being appreciated and having someone say thank you once in a while. And that does happen in that role. But I think probably we could all reflect a little bit on going back to my comment about being predisposed to saying yes all the time and doing service. I'm one of those people who's naturally curious and likes to know how things work. And I like to know the details and the behind the scenes activities that are going on. And so that does not become a burden. It's actually kind of enjoyable day to day to know, to meet with the deans and to know what's going on behind the scenes and what the bigger picture is happening. So it's often looked upon by faculty as a burden and something horrible to be avoided. But I actually found it quite enjoyable, and every day was a new day, and I learned so much about how a big university functions. So you have to look at the positive side of things.
That's cool. Yeah, that's really nice to hear.
I would do it again. I mean, you know, when you get that questionnaire about, for a job applicant, like, would you hire this person again? And I often think that's a really important question when you think back, like, would I hire that person again? Or would I do the job again? And if the answer is yes, then, or if it's no, you know, it really forces you to think back on it.
That actually kind of reminds me of another dynamic of service, which is like one place. So we've been sort of looking at it from, like, a lot of us have, you know, made comments about wanting to build our CVs and that it's important to see service on there. But looking at it from the other perspective of having been on search committees, it definitely matters. Like, I've been a member of a search committee, and you know, as you're evaluating people's CVs, especially at a place like NYBG, I would say, where like there's not that many of us. I mean, we're maybe like 15 scientists. My department at UF was 50 people just in the biology department. So like we have a lot of work, a lot of outreach, a lot of committee work, and not that many people to contribute to carrying that load here at the garden. And so I definitely am looking for colleagues who have a documented commitment to service, because that tells me that they're going to be good colleagues in that way, that they're going to share that load. So if I ever like, this hasn't happened, but you know, if I saw a CV that had like nothing in the service, like I wouldn't want that person as a colleague, because like I know that I or someone else is going to end up doing their share of the work. So I think it is like thinking strategically and thinking about yourself and the way you're going to be evaluated by people who are looking for good colleagues. It's important to demonstrate that you would be a good colleague. And I think service and outreach is a way to show that you care about other people and that you're not just all about yourself and your research program. So it does matter.
What are some strategies we could think of for, say, a new faculty member or a new botanical garden curator, who all these organizations are super excited for that new, bright, shiny person who has energy and ideas, and everybody's going to come with them for asks? What strategies might we give them for avoiding becoming overloaded and overwhelmed?
I think one of the most helpful things for me when I went through this phase is to find somebody, a no person, right? Somebody who you can say, hey, this opportunity came up, here's why I'm thinking about it. And they will be like, no, this is a bad idea. This is too much of your time. I had somebody who was very instrumental for helping me realign my service goals that way. And it can be anybody, right? You can have multiple people, whatever. That said, I sometimes still override my no people, but I feel like I'm wiser now. But when I was first figuring it all out, that definitely helped, having somebody sort of outside of my immediate life to help me assess and evaluate.
Oh, go ahead, Mackenzie.
I'll just say quickly, I think too, having a good idea of what that would do for you is good to keep in mind. Like, are you going to meet people that you think you want to be able to network with? Is it going to promote something that you support, like a particular student organization or something? Like, what sort of selfishly, what do you get out of that offer?
I have a couple of thoughts. One, I would say, and this is something I've learned the hard way, don't say yes right away. Like there's nothing ever so urgent really that it needs like an immediate answer. And if it does, they haven't done like they everything I was saying earlier about like effective and time, well organized, they probably haven't done. And another thing that I've learned, and I feel like I like learned this anecdote or read this somewhere years ago, and I can't remember what the source of it was, but it was kind of two-parted. Like one, it was ask a lot of questions. Like ask the question about like I want specific details. I want time commitment. How often do you meet? How often do you, and like if you ask a bunch of detailed questions to really try to figure out what this commitment is going to look like for you. And if the person can't answer it, then they're expecting you to do all that work and to figure all of that out on their own. And that's a dangerous situation. And the other trick I learned that I thought was just brilliant, and I wish I could remember where I heard this, was if you get asked to do something and you feel bad saying no, but it's just not feasible for you, you can say yes, but. So you can say, sure, I'll do that. But like if your dean comes to you and says, I'd like you to lead this ridiculous committee, you can say, sure, I'll do that if you give me teaching release, because here's what my time commitment looks like. I cannot do what you're asking me to do on top of my already 100-hour-a-week job. So something's got to give. I'm happy to do that for you, but you have to tell me what you're going to give me basically to make it feasible for me to do it. Otherwise, it's not possible. So, and just to like continue to do that, like, sure, but sure, okay, sure, great, but, just to kind of always, and like eventually they might get to a place where they're just going to give up and try somebody else, some other poor sucker, if it's really something that is not sort of feasible to ask a person to do, and that sort of interaction could actually help them to realize that. So I think all of what I just said boils down to like wait and ask a lot of questions before you commit to anything.
Sometimes I worry that we do a disservice to junior faculty, for example, when we kind of suppress their desire to do service, when their mentoring committees repress that. Because again, I'm keep coming back to this. I think some of us are predisposed to serving. We like doing it. It's kind of like sustenance. And if your, department chair or committee is saying, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Say no, say no. Well, you might actually be squelching someone's really an important need that they have to be involved. So yeah, you can definitely be stretched too thin, but at the same time, we shouldn't discourage people who want to say yes. Only you know how much you can really manage. I actually got offended by my local orchid society because I volunteered to be their treasurer. And they said, oh, you're too busy. You're a professor. You wouldn't have time for that. I think, wait a minute, you don't know anything about my time. I mean, if I'm volunteering to do it, it's because I think I'll be able to do it, So anyway, we have to be careful about prejudging other people's abilities.
Well, and not to mention that's sometimes how you meet people. Like some of my best friends on campus are the people I've met through service. And as a young faculty or new faculty, that's really isolating if you haven't met people that sort of share your values and your interests.
I've heard about some institutions are considering sort of like alternate paths to like tenure and promotion. It's like you could excel in research or you could excel in service. Like maybe your teaching has to be stellar across the board, but maybe you don't have to do it all. And so we try and protect faculty's time for research, right? But maybe in some institutions, if there was a way to really promote and encourage people who have that vision and passion for service, that could be awesome and be rewarded and retained. Because you're right, like that those instincts and that period in your life is really special, and it can go away. It can go away, and you hate to squash that. maybe a question then is like, what do we, are there any strategies for encouraging other people who aren't as inclined to serve? And maybe you feel like they're not doing as much as they could be doing. How can we help them to find their place and to keep things we care about going?
This is actually part of what my negative thing that I was going to talk about. It was related to the succession conversation we had previously, because some of my negative experiences are kind of exactly what Emily was saying too, of especially early on trying to say yes to things that have a time endpoint. So I was served in a number of positions where I was pulling teeth, and I felt like I was trying to promote what I was doing and talk about how amazing it was, because it is, or it was, trying to get the next person to take on my role. And I was about to graduate, right? Like I'm gone. Like this is not a thing that can be sustained unless somebody else takes it on. And then similar things happened when I was a postdoc. And I don't know if part of that is just not having spent enough time making service an active part of what people are regularly thinking about, right? It's not like all of a sudden somebody's leaving, we have to kind of think about what's happening next. But like, whether it's the postdoc society at Penn State, or it's, the Crow Institution at Wisconsin, like having service be a sort of an ongoing thing that people are thinking about, and seeing where it pops up, if they have a one-off time that they volunteer, and kind of getting them thinking about getting more involved. And I don't know how that really looks. Maybe Rachel, your question was more focused on, young faculty and how to, people that might not be thinking about as much service yet. But I think it's hard. I've had a lot of trouble. And I think Ken's point of the folks in this room are probably people that are naturally inclined to give back, and to be involved. And so I've struggled, talking to lab mates, talking to colleagues, talking to different people about what I'm excited about. And there's just not the same kind of enthusiasm about it. So if anybody else has ideas, I'm totally excited to hear them for advice. Yeah.
I guess I'd say turning the kind of stereotype around that service is a burden and it's not fun and it's stressful, and anytime we can emphasize the joy, the satisfaction that comes from doing it, and that being the chair isn't such a bad thing. There's a lot of positives to it, and just trying to emphasize that. So not being so not looking at negative as not looking at service as a negative, but as something that's fulfilling. We should always try to promote that.
I like that. And just this panel has helped me think about how service can help you build community, maybe more than anything else. So emphasizing that, I think, is important, because we all need community.
Yeah, and that, again, for me, like sort of finding ways to do things that you enjoy, but in a different way, and like use skills that you have. Like if you really love to read, but you hate talking to people, you can be an associate editor or a journal, or an editor in chief, or a reviewer, or a panel member. Like there really are service equivalents, I think, to every component of our jobs and of like personal interests. Like, can your work with like the orchid societies and other like, I think that's a really beautiful example of kind of bridging like professional and personal interests, and also building community and sharing your knowledge. And so yeah, the fact that it's like not something that we should look on as like something we have to do as part of our jobs, but something that we get to do as part of our jobs. Like we get to have this fun add-on that can come with all these additional benefits.
Maybe one final question, and then we'll be about at time. If you could go back in time and tell a younger version of yourself something about your service trajectory moving forward, what would it be? I guess
I
I'll
think
start. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think I could have relied on mentors a little bit more when I was starting out and asking them for advice or for ideas about what certain roles are like. I think I just sort of forged ahead. This is just a chronic problem of mine more generally, but you know, I forged ahead and did stuff where I could have had a nice conversation with people I trust about what does this particular service role look like, time-wise, you know, how was it fulfilling when you did it, to get a better sense of what I think would have brought me joy earlier rather than through the trial and error process that I found myself undertaking.
Yeah, I think what Emily said is the voice I wish I'd had about like being strategic and not saying yes right away. And maybe being really honest about my strengths and passions. I do think there's this idea of like honor and, oh gosh, it would be so cool to do that. And people I looked up to did that. And it's so easy to say yes and to not know what that means in your year, especially like in the summer when you're in like conference mode and maybe you're not teaching or you're away from the lab or whatever, and you can get this like alternate vision of what's possible. And then, boy, right about now in January, right? You're like, oh God. So, yeah, I think being strategic and then realizing too that some opportunities are going to come around again. So it's not like your only time that you could ever do this thing. And yeah, maybe it is the time to really focus on getting my teaching sorted out or finishing my dissertation or something like that. A lot of things are not once in a lifetime opportunities.
I think the succession piece of advice is really good. I feel like the only times I've been frustrated were like, you know, like the student advising, the student group advising I was mentioning earlier, where I kind of realized like this isn't really for me. I wish that I had known going into that to have more of a way to get out of it. It would have been, but like it was fine. I mean, that sort of happened organically. But this is making me think, like reflecting back, like I don't actually think I would change anything. There's not a single service activity that I would choose not to do or that I would have done significantly differently. The only one is the SSB conference. So I hosted a conference at the University of Florida for 200 and some odd people in January of 2020, and that damn near killed me. And that I'd do differently. I'm not good at delegating, or at least then I wasn't good at delegating. I was a perfectionist about it, and I felt like if my hands were not on every single piece of that something was going to go terribly wrong, and that was really dumb. I should have, like, I had a great team of people around me. I had lots of people willing to help, and I should have taken more advantage of it and delegated more. But other than that, I don't think I'd change anything.
I think I'll just add with like, I mean, I'm not that old. So like I don't have too much of a younger self to like refer to, but like kind of with the thinking about things, when to say no, and like saying yes to things when you're not busy. I think especially for students, like these BSA commitments are, you know, multiple years. Like when I took the student rep position, I should have thought like I will be defending my master's thesis before I finish this service. And like, I mean, I'd still do it, but like that is something that needs to cross my head is like, will I be doing prelims if I pick up this position? And is that going to be, it's like thinking about what else is coming down the pipe when you accept, I think is important.
All right. Any final thoughts to share? Well, thank you all so much for your time and attention and thoughts. And it was really fun to be part of a community thinking about this. So all best laid plans for only meaningful, joyous service in 2024. And do reach out if you have any questions, especially related to BSA service. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Rachel.
Bye. Thank you.